Hello, everybody. So, in concluding this initial section on primary emotions, it's important to summarize some of the major points that I've made so far. So, in addition, then, to describing, like I did, the four primary emotional categories of joy, anger, fear, and sadness, I also talked about the purpose of emotions, the feeling of emotions in our body. That we feel what we believe, and as well as the fact that emotional responses are just like sensory responses. So if you haven't, then look back if you want to my just previous episodes, all the way back to episode 7. It's all talking about primary emotions, from the beginning of talking about the four categories to all these other parts and aspects. But now, in the conclusion of this initial section, I'm asking you to look at, to think about, to wonder about, and eventually to discover something actually quite harder to do. And that is to understand that all emotions, all emotional responses are good. All of them. Some are better, but all emotions, emotional responses are good. We typically talk about positive emotions and negative emotions. I think even on this channel, in some previous episodes, I might have used the term negative emotions. Well, not anymore. And not because I want to describe how they're all positive. And so going forward, I'll be using my language, not traditional language, when talking about our emotional responses. So it's easy to understand why we call them typically positive emotions and negative emotions. Positive emotions obviously are in the joy category. Happy and giddy and pleased and all these other words we have to use, or that we use in the English language to describe, in general sense, the joy response. Those are obviously, we refer to them as the positive emotions. So the negative emotions we typically refer to are anger, fear, and sadness. We typically call them negative, that they're a bad thing. Obviously, we're looking to feel joy all the time, or hopefully most of the time. Understandable. And negative emotions exist, or what we call negative emotions exist. They exist like joy to tell us something, but they're all good for us. And it's changing that understanding is powerful, absolutely powerful, to know all the emotional responses are good, because they're all good for us. The reason that they're good for us is because they're equally, what we call negative emotions are equally essential to our living in a healthy way and surviving. All emotional responses, just like all sensory responses, are equally good for us, and they are good things to happen. And it's our ability now to understand them as good things in the way then we don't feel them so badly and so powerfully. We literally can say, oh wow, I'm feeling a lot of anger right now. Kind of brush it off. Well, what do I do with it? All right, I'll do that with it. That is a way different response than just blowing up at somebody. So that's just a quick example of how knowing our emotional responses, what they are, that they are good. Okay, what do I do with it now? That is the huge difference to how we've been living with our emotional responses all along. Conceptually speaking, that's relatively easy to understand, that emotional responses are good for us. What I'm going to ask you now and in the future episodes is to experience them, all of them, positively. That's harder to do. That's really, we usually do not feel good about anger, fear, and sadness responses. We usually feel really badly about them. So that's the big shift, the big cognitive shift that I'm asking you to make starting now and into future episodes. Big, big shift. In other words, when you feel fear, that's a good thing. When you feel sadness, that's a good thing. When you feel anger, that is a good thing. Again, it's what you do with the feeling. Those emotional responses or feelings, same thing. They're there to tell you something. They're there to, like, if something causes the fear response, you probably want to avoid that thing. It's a good thing that it's telling you, avoid it, get out, get away from. What we do is we experience fear, and we do that, and we then get afraid of the feeling of fear. We're like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? That is a typical human experience. When it's a big fear response, really chronic, goes on all the time, that can get into an anxiety disorder of like, oh my God, there's something seriously wrong with me. I constantly feel fear. We'll talk more about as to why a person, any human, can feel more fear at any time and more consistently. We'll talk about that really soon. But we judge it, we become afraid of our fear response, and that makes it all worse. So it's understanding, it's like believing, knowing, and feeling differently about our feelings, our emotional responses, when looking at it this way. That is a really powerful thing when managing our emotions, our feelings, our emotional responses. We can literally eliminate fear of fear. We can eliminate sadness of sadness, and we can eliminate anger of anger. Because when we do that, we reduce all emotional responses by some huge factor. When we eliminate, we stop judging our emotional responses. We do not judge them, just like mindfulness tells us now it's a good thing. This is another way of learning the same idea, is eliminating the judgment of our emotional responses, stopping the fear of fear, sadness of sadness, and anger of anger. That is huge. And I will have many more episodes to describe how to do that over time. Many more episodes to help you understand how to do that. Finally, this discovery, this understanding and discovery that all emotions are good and some are better is remarkably helpful in addressing clinically what we call anxiety and depression. There are several, actually a few steps, but I'll talk more about them later, steps to reduce and eliminate anxiety and depression. They can be eliminated. Nobody anymore has to think that you are stuck with anxiety or stuck with depression. That does not have to occur anymore. And this understanding is a part of it. It's one part of it that I'll talk about. But it's an incredible thing to change from feeling anxious all the time, for instance, to eliminating it from your life. When my patients here do that, when they go through the steps, which can include medication, by the way, and I'll tell more about later, but in this cognitive shift, this is harder. Taking the medication is easy. Really focusing on mutually caring relationships, easier. But making this shift of like, all emotional responses are good, I shouldn't judge them anymore. I didn't even know that I was judging them. That is a harder thing to do. Finally, and to conclude, when you do that, when you get to this point of discovery that all emotions are good and some are better, you have superpowers. You, for the rest of your life, will have this superpower emotionally. It is incredible to get to that point, especially if you have been dealing with clinically diagnosed anxiety or depression. It's incredible. So I hope you feel, literally feel, some joy response right now in this message to you, because we can discover this together. I often say in the beginning of the episodes, we can do this. I have it written now, but because we can. These things are discoverable. They are there now right in front of us. And it'll give us superpowers, and we will be so much happier, so much joy, more joy response, and also so much better together as human beings. So, as I always say, a lot more to come in future episodes. And until then, take good